Gospel of Mark. Many scholars contend that the Gospel of Mark is the earliest of the four Gospels, likely written around AD 70, roughly 40 years after Jesus' crucifixion. It is also known for having the most abrupt and unconventional ending. It concludes with Mary Magdalene and two other women arriving at Jesus' tomb with spices to anoint his body. They find the tomb open and a young man dressed in a white robe sitting inside. The young man reassures them, saying, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here," and instructs the women to inform Jesus' disciples of the resurrection. Trembling and astonished, they fled from the tomb and said nothing to anyone, because they were afraid. Mark 16 verses 6 to 8. This is where Mark's gospel ends. The reason for the gospel's abrupt conclusion has been a subject of debate for centuries. Later Christian writers added a longer ending to the text, which includes Jesus speaking to his disciples, appearing to Mary Magdalene, and instructing his followers to go and spread the gospel message. Money from a fish. Throughout the Gospels, various religious leaders and officials sought to entrap Jesus. On one occasion, tax collectors inquired whether Jesus and his disciples had paid the required temple tax. Jesus informed his disciples that, as the Son of God, he was exempt from the tax. However, to avoid causing offense, he instructed them to pay it anyway. In an unexpected turn, Jesus told Simon Peter exactly how to obtain the money. To avoid causing offense, go to the sea, cast a hook, and take the first fish that comes up. When you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take it and give it to them for me and for yourself. Matthew 17 verse 27. While Jesus could have effortlessly provided the money through a divine act, he chose instead to use this unusual method. This instance not only highlights his resourcefulness, but also his tendency to address practical matters in surprising ways, all while maintaining a lighthearted and purposeful approach. Ultimate assassin mode. The story of Ehud and King Eglon in Judges 3 verses 12 to 30 is a vivid example of the recurring cycle of sin, judgment, and deliverance in Israel's history. At the time, the Israelites had fallen into idolatry, leading God to allow them to be oppressed by King Eglon of Moab. After 18 years of suffering, the Israelites cried out to God, who raised up Ehud, a left-handed man from the tribe of Benjamin, to deliver them. Ehud's left-handedness played a key role in the narrative, as it allowed him to conceal his weapon on his right side, an area that would not be searched by the guards, who typically frisked the right side of visitors. This clever subversion of the normal protocol sets the stage for Ehud's bold and surprising act of assassination. The dramatic climax comes when Ehud, after delivering the tribute to King Eglon, convinces the king to dismiss his attendants, claiming he has a private message from God. In the privacy of the king's chambers, Ehud fatally stabs Eglon, whose extreme obesity causes the sword to disappear into his body. The graphic detail of the king's death highlights the irony of his downfall. His excess and sin are symbolized by his physical state. The delayed discovery of the king's death, as his attendants mistakenly think he is using the restroom, gives Ehud time to escape and ultimately deliver Israel from Moabite oppression. This story not only highlights God's ability to use unlikely individuals and methods to bring about deliverance, but also underscores the cyclical nature of Israel's faithfulness and the unexpected ways in which divine justice unfolds. Killing a dead guy. The plot to kill Lazarus in the Gospel of John, specifically John 12 verses 9 to 11, is one of the more ironic and striking episodes in the narrative of Jesus' final days. Most Christians are familiar with the Pharisees' deep opposition to Jesus, culminating in their plot to kill him. However, the story of Lazarus reveals just how far the religious leaders would go in trying to suppress any sign of Jesus' divine power. Lazarus had been a close friend of Jesus, and in John 11 we read the dramatic account of how Jesus raised him from the dead after Lazarus had been buried for 4 days. This miracle was not only a stunning demonstration of Jesus' authority over life and death, but also served as a powerful witness to his divine identity. The event stirred significant interest, and many of the people who witnessed Lazarus' resurrection began to believe in Jesus. As a result, Lazarus became somewhat of a local celebrity. People were eager to hear his testimony about Jesus, the man who had brought him back to life. However, the Pharisees and religious authorities were deeply threatened by the growing influence of Jesus, and now, Lazarus' miraculous return to life posed an even greater challenge. In John 12 verses 10 to 11, the religious leaders conspired to kill Lazarus as well, because on account of him many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. The irony is palpable. Here was a man who had already died once, had been brought back to life by Jesus, and now the religious authorities were plotting to kill him again, essentially seeking to undo the very miracle that had led many to faith in Jesus. Worst hair day ever. The story of Absalom's tragic end in 2 Samuel 18 serves as a dramatic turn in the narrative of King David's reign. Absalom, David's son, staged a rebellion to overthrow his father and seize the throne. Absalom was described in 2 Samuel chapter 14 verses 25 to 26 as being exceptionally handsome, with long, flowing hair that he took great pride in, even weighing it once a year after his haircut. His beauty and vanity were part of the allure that attracted followers to his cause. Absalom's rebellion was successful in driving David out of Jerusalem, but it eventually led to a bloody confrontation between the forces loyal to David and Absalom's army. As the battle raged on, Absalom fled the field on horseback, but his famous hair became his undoing. While riding through a dense forest, his long locks got caught in the branches of a tree, leaving him suspended and vulnerable. This moment of poetic justice was a striking contrast to the image of Absalom's beauty and confidence. Hanging from the tree, Absalom was an easy target for David's soldiers. Despite David's instructions to spare his son's life, Absalom was killed by Joab, one of David's commanders, and his death marked the tragic end of the rebellion. Messy family tree. The story of Tamar in Genesis 38 is a complex and morally challenging narrative that highlights themes of justice, duty, and human agency. Tamar was the widow of Er, the son of Judah, who had died without providing her with children. According to the custom of levirate marriage, Tamar was required to marry her husband's brother, Onan, to produce an heir for her late husband. However, Onan refused to fulfill this duty, and God struck him dead for his disobedience. Judah, fearing for the lives of his remaining sons, promised Tamar that she would marry his youngest son, Shelah, once he came of age. But when Judah failed to keep this promise, Tamar found herself in a precarious position, unable to fulfill her role in continuing her husband's lineage, and facing a future of poverty and social stigma. In an act of desperate self-determination, Tamar took matters into her own hands. Disguising herself as a prostitute, she positioned herself along the road where Judah would pass by. When Judah encountered her, he unknowingly slept with her, and she became pregnant with twins, Perez and Zerah. Later, when it was discovered that Tamar was pregnant, she was condemned to be burned for adultery. However, Tamar produced the items Judah had given her as a pledge during their encounter: his seal, cord, and staff, as proof that he was the father. Judah, confronted with his own hypocrisy, admitted his guilt, declaring that Tamar was more righteous than he was. Tamar's actions, though controversial, secured her place in the lineage of Judah, and the twins she bore became ancestors of King David and ultimately Jesus, as recorded in the genealogy of Matthew 1 verse 3. Construction site miracle. In 2 Kings chapter 6 verses 1 to 7, Elisha and his followers were working to build a house when one of them lost his axe head in the Jordan River. The man, distressed because the axe was borrowed, exclaimed in panic, as the loss was significant. In response, Elisha calmly cut a stick, threw it into the water where the axe head had sunk, and miraculously, the axe head floated to the surface. This seemingly small miracle demonstrates God's provision even in mundane situations. It's a reminder that God's power can intervene in practical matters of daily life, not just in grand, dramatic events. The miracle also highlights Elisha's prophetic authority, showing that God worked through him to provide for his followers' needs in the simplest of circumstances. Long sermon turned deadly. In Acts 20 verses 7 to 12, Paul was preaching in Troas, and his sermon stretched on late into the night. A young man named Eutychus, sitting on the windowsill of a third-story room, fell asleep as the sermon continued, eventually tumbling out of the window and suffering a fatal fall. The tragedy occurred suddenly, and Eutychus was believed to be dead when Paul rushed down, embracing him and declaring that he was alive. Paul then returned to the upper room, broke bread with the believers, and continued preaching until dawn. This miracle highlights Paul's apostolic authority and God's power to bring life even in the face of death. While some may see this as a lesson in the dangers of sleeping during long church services, it ultimately underscores God's ability to intervene in desperate situations and restore life. The event also reinforces the theme of resurrection that runs throughout the New Testament, pointing to the hope of life beyond death. If you enjoyed part 2 of Every Bizarre Story in the Bible, you're going to love part 1. In the first video, we dive into even more strange, unexpected, and fascinating stories from the Bible that are often overlooked. Don't miss out on this wild journey through the most curious and thought-provoking stories the Bible has to offer. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.